We continue now at the top of Daf Vav Amud Aleph in Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 6a. And the previous summit, Shmuel was talking about the different languages of Kiddushin. And Shmuel said that if the man says to the woman, Hareat Mekudeshes, Hareat Mureses, so then it's a good Kiddushin. And the Gemara initially thought that the Chiddush of Shmuel was that even though he left out the word Li, even though he said Hareat Mekudeshes without the word Li, it's still a good Kiddushin. But then the Gemara rejected that and proved that Shmuel holds Yadayim Shein Mochichos are not Yadayim. You have to say the word Li. And so the Gemara said really that's what Shmuel had said, that if you say Hareat Mekudeshes Li, Hareat Mureses Li, so then that's a good Kiddushin. But the Gemara said that's not a Chiddush at all. Why would Shmuel have had to say that? And so the Gemara now says really Shmuel's Chiddush is in the later languages that he was speaking about. Let's say, for example, the husband says to the wife, Hareini Ishech, I am your husband. Hareini Balech, I'm your husband. So where he's referring to himself instead of her, so that's a problem. That's what the Gemara now says. Lishni Basroi Kamashmal. And Shmuel is teaching us those later languages that are no good. Hacha Ksiv Ki Yikach Velo Sheyikach Esatzmo, because it says by Kiddushin he has to take her, not that he takes himself. It has to be phrased around her. V'hacha Ksiv, and over here it's written, meaning by divorce it's written. There were similar statements by divorce that Shmuel made. It says V'shilcha Velo Sheyishlach Esatzmo. He has to send her out, not that he sends himself. Rashi explains, Lishni Basroi de Ka'amar Behu Ein Kan Beis Mechosh. That was the later cases of Shmuel where we say there's no way it's effective. Bein de Kiddushin, Bein de Gerushin, whether we're talking about Kiddushin or Gerushin, that was the real Chiddush of Shmuel, the formulations that were not effective. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Hareat Ishti, Hareat Arusasi, Hareat Kenuyali Mikudeshes. If he uses any of those languages, it's a good Kiddushin, Hareat Ishti, Arusasi, or Kenuyali. Hareat Shali, Hareat Bereshusi, Hareat Zakukali. If he uses any of these languages, Hareat Shali, Hareat Bereshusi, Hareat Zakukali, Mikudeshes. Also in that case, Mikudeshes. And the Gemara asks, V'lisninu kulu kechada. Why is it that the Tana is listing them separately? Hareat Ishti, Hareat Arusasi, Hareat Kenuyali is the first phrase, and then Hareat Shali, Hareat Bereshusi, Hareat Zakukali. It should all be together if it's all Mikudeshes. And the Gemara says, Tana tlos Shaminu v'garsinu. The Tana heard the three of them, each set of three together, and so that's how the Tana taught the halacha. And the Gemara continues, they had the following question. Miyuchedes li ma, what if he uses the language of miyuchedes li? Miyuedes li ma, what about miyuedes li? Ezrasi ma, what if he uses ezrasi? Negdasi ma, what if he uses the language of negdasi? Atsurasi ma, what if he uses the language of atsurasi? Tzelasi ma, what if he uses the language of tzelasi? Segurasi ma, what if he uses the language of segurasi? Tachti mahu, tefusasi ma, what if he uses tachti? Or tefusasi, or lekuchti mahu? What is the answer to all of these different formulations? Are they good Kiddushin or not? And the Gemara says, Pshot miyachad, that we can at least answer one of them. The Tanyas will learn in a Braisa, Omer lekuchasi harezim mekudeshes. If he uses the language of lekuchasi, that's a good Kiddushin, mishum shenemar, because the pasuk says, Ki yikach ish isha. It uses that language in the pasuk. It says, Ki yikach ish isha. And we will note over here that Rashi points out many of these languages are references to marriage or kiddushin in the psukim. For example, Rashi says, as Rasi Negdasi is Lashon Eselo Ezer Kenegdo. The pasuk says Ezer Kenegdo, and so that is the basis for the Gemara's question. And the Gemara continues, Iboy Lahu, they had the following question, Charufasi ma, what if he uses the language of Charufasi? Tashma, coming here the following proof. The Tanya, as we learned in a Braisa, Ha'omer Charufasi Mikudeshes, if a man uses the language of Charufasi, that is a good Kiddushin. Shekain bi Yehuda Korin la Arusa Charufa, because in Yehuda they refer to an Arusa as a Charufa. The Gemara says, Yehuda have a Ruba di Alma, is Yehuda the majority of the world. And so the Gemara explains, Hachi Kamar, this is what we mean to say. Ha'omer Charufasi Mikudeshes, if he says Charufasi, that's a good Kiddushin. Shenemar, as it says in the Pasuk, V'yishivcha necharefes li'ish, it says she's a shivcha necharefes li'ish, and so you see from the Pasuk that the language of Charufa is used in that fashion. And then V'od, and furthermore, Yehuda Korin la Arusa Charufa. Also in Yehuda, they refer to an Arusa as a Charufa. But the Gemara says, V'Yehuda v'od l'kraf, you need to have Yehuda as an addition to the Pasuk. If you have a Pasuk, isn't that a good enough source? Why would we even need to mention the custom in Yehuda? And so the Gemara says, Alahachi Kamar, rather, this is what we mean to say, Ha'omer Charufa b'Yehuda Mikudeshes. If he says Charufa in Yehuda, it's Mikudeshes, it's a good Kiddushin. Shekain b'Yehuda Korin la Arusa Charufa, because in Yehuda they call an Arusa Charufa, and that's why specifically in Yehuda, if he says Charufasi, it's going to be a good Kiddushin. And Rashi explains, Shekain Yehuda, that specifically in Yehuda the language of Charuf is used for Kiddushin, and that's why only in Yehuda the language of Charuf is effective. Avol Mikra Lekal Melef, and you can't learn from the pasuk. Dahu Yichud Bialmahu, because that's just talking about Yichud, it's just talking about being together. It's not real Kiddushin. Sharei B'Shifcha Kananis HaKosim Medaber, because when it uses the phrase V'Shifcha Necharefes Leish, it's talking about a Shifcha Kananis. Shein Kiddushin Tovsin, but there's no real Kiddushin by a Shifcha Kananis. Umei Kara Havasaka Daita. Now originally when we brought this pasuk, we thought that meant Kiman Da'amar Begitin Bechetzia Shivcha V'Chetzia B'Aschor HaKosim Medaber. There are two opinions what the pasuk is talking about. There's a Man Da'amar that says we're talking about a half Shivcha, half free woman, the Shaychi But Sad Kiddushin, where there's some element of Kiddushin in that case. That's why we originally brought the pasuk, but now we're saying no, it's specifically in Yehuda. The pasuk is not necessarily referring to Kiddushin. And the Gemara says, B'may askin, and what exactly is the case? The case is that he's not speaking to her in general about issues of divorce and marriage. So how is she supposed to know Maika Amarla, what he's saying to her? In other words, she has to understand that it's a Kiddushin, and if they're not speaking about that issue, so then how is she to understand that Charuf is referring to the fact that he's giving her Kiddushin? But then you're going to say that rather we're talking about where he is speaking to her about issues of divorce and marriage. So if that's the case, so even if he doesn't say any of these languages, it's okay, because just speaking to her about the Indian, about the topic, is actually enough. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, if he's speaking with a woman regarding divorce or marriage, and he gives her get, or he gives her kiddushin, and he doesn't explain. Rabbi Yossi Omer Dayo, Rabbi Yossi says that is sufficient. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Tzarech Lefarish, Rabbi Yehuda says no, he has to explain it explicitly. V'Yomer Rav Huna Amar Shmuel, and Rav Huna says that Shmuel says halacha Rabbi Yossi. The halach is like Rabbi Yossi. So again, if they're speaking about Gittin v'Kiddushin, nothing needs to be said. And the Gemara says, Amri, they answer, Liolam b'medaber ima aliske gita v'kiddusha. Really, we're talking about a case where he is speaking with her about issues of divorce or marriage. V'iti yoiv la v'shasek hachinami. And if he would give it to her and say nothing, that's true. It would indeed be true that it's a good Kiddushin. Hachab mayaskinan, but over here, what are we talking about? The yoiv la v'amar la b'hani lishni. He gives it to her and then he says one of these languages that we mentioned. V'hachi kami boile. And the question of the Gemara is as follows, Hani lishni l'kiddushe ka'amar la. When he uses these languages, does he mean to say that he's giving it for Kiddushin purposes? Or maybe no, the languages actually indicate something else. L'melacha kamar la, he's talking about work, and the Gemara says to that take, where the Gemara leaves that as a question. And Rashi explains, Hachanami, indeed, if he would have given it to her and been silent, the Mekacha would be a good Kiddushin. Rabbi Yossi, like Rabbi Yossi says, De'amina mistama l'shem Kiddushin nasam, because we would say, mistama, he gave it for Kiddushin purposes, v'kibaltam l'kach, and she accepted it for that reason. Aval hashta deparish hanach lishni, but now that he's using these other languages, so im lashon Kiddushin hey niskach, if they are languages of Kiddushin, so then it's a good Kiddushin. V'im lashon lavo lasos malachtohem, but if they're languages of that she should come and do his work, harigila b'daito sheino chafetz l'kach. So then he's showing that he doesn't want to have Kiddushin right now, and that's the basis for the question of the Gemara. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, Kufa, returning to what we said above, if he's speaking with a woman about issues of divorce or marriage, he gives her a get, or he gives her Kiddushin, velo pirish, and he doesn't explain. Rabbi Yossi Omer Dayo, Rabbi Yossi says that's sufficient. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Tzarech Lefarish, Rabbi Yehuda says he has to explain. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says, V'hu sha'asukin bo so'inyan. That's all true if they're still dealing with that topic. V'chein Amar Rabbi Elazar Amar Rav Oshia, and similarly Rabbi Elazar says that Rav Oshia says, V'hu sha'asukin bo so'inyan. They have to still be dealing with the same topic. And the Gemara says, Kitanoi, let's say it's a machlokas tanoim, Rabbi Omer v'hu sha'asukin bo so'inyan. Rabbi says they have to still be dealing with the topic. Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Shimon says, Af al pi she'ein asukin bo so'inyan. Even if they're not dealing with the topic, it's still the case that it's a Kiddushin. The Gemara says, "V'lavda sukan bo so'inyan," but if they're not even dealing with the topic, again, "Mino yoda mai kamarla." So we're still in the same question. From where would she know what he's even saying to her? How could it possibly be a good Kiddushin in that case? Amar Abaya says, "Me inyan le'inyan bo so'inyan." So they went from one topic to another topic, but it's still within the same general topic. As Rashi says, "Me inyan le'inyan shepasku miladaver bekiddushin mamish." They're no longer talking about Kiddushin, actual Kiddushin. Vayim medavrim b'dvar macherim, but they're talking about other other things, but nevertheless, it's something to do with the fact that they're going to be a couple. For example, he's asking her, what's your dowry? How many fields do you have for parnasa? So it has something to do with Kiddushin, and so that's why it's possible that it's still a Kiddushin in that situation. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Huna Mar Shmuel. Rav Huna says that Shmuel says, Halacha Rabbi Yossi, the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. Again, as long as he was speaking with the woman about issues of get or Kiddushin, and he gives her the get or Kiddushin, he doesn't have to explain anything. Even if he doesn't explain anything, as Rabbi Yossi says, Dayo, that is sufficient. Amar le Rav Yemar le Rav Ashi. Rav Yemar says to Rav Ashi, Ve'lahad Amar Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel. But that which Rav Yehuda said, that Shmuel said, Kol she'eno yodea b'tiv gittin v'kiddushin, anyone who doesn't know with the halachas of gittin and kiddushin, lo yehelo esek imohem, he shouldn't deal with these halachas. If you're not an expert at gittin v'kiddushin, you shouldn't deal with it. So afilu lo shmiya lehad Rav Huna Amar Shmuel, is that true even if he didn't hear this halacha of Rav Huna Amar Shmuel, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi in this case? Amar le said to him, in hachinami, yes, indeed, that's the case, even if you didn't hear this halacha, this ruling of Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel, so then you're not an expert at Gittin v'Kiddushin, you shouldn't deal with Gittin and Kiddushin. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, v'chein begerishin, and similarly by gerishin, nasan lo gita, v'yamar lo harayat meshulachas, harayat megureshes, harayat muteres l'chol adam, harayhum hi megureshes. If he gives her a get, and he says to her, harayat meshulachas, or harayat megureshes, or harayat muteres l'chol adam, that's a good gerishin. And the Gemara says, Pshita nasan lagita v'yamar lo leishto. It's obvious if he gives her a get and he says to his wife, Hareat baschor, and you're free. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Vav Amud Beis.